Welcome to the first episode of the RE-Talesio podcast/Zoom/Clubhouse series. RE-Talesio can be found at www.retales.io and is a community exploring DTC, e-commerce, and technology powered by retail and shopping centers. In this first episode titled, "Are Fulfillment Centers Dead? Long Live the Shopping Center. Can retail cut fulfillment costs?" we explore the possibility and limitations of e-commerce and retail store fulfillment from within a shopping center environment. Our permanent hosts are Rebecca Kondrat of Kondrat Retail, a retail advisor to DTC and other tech-forward firms, Jessica Mauser of Lee & Associates, a national commercial real estate brokerage, Ryan Wolf, my co-founder and chief operating officer of Shop Fulfill Corporation, and myself, Shlomo Chop, managing partner of Case Equity Partners, a real estate investment firm, and founder and CEO of Shop Fulfill Corporation. Joining us as a guest panelist on this episode is Matt Powers of JLL, who, in addition to an illustrious career at Walmart overseeing their industrial property portfolio, now leads JLL's e-commerce distribution practice, where he advises many of the largest corporations as to the strategies and implementation around retail and e-commerce fulfillment. Rebecca Kondrat has spent her career building revenue-driving retail environments for companies ranging from Starbucks to Apple to Warby Parker to Out of Voices and many other brands. Jessica Mauser is the president of Lee & Associates office in the San Francisco area and also sits of the national board of the company. Jessica, on a day-to-day basis, works with tenants and landlords within the retail space. Ryan Wolf, chief operating officer of Shop Fulfill Corporation, is also part of the team and retail visionary behind its Retail OS concept. Over his career, Ryan has been involved in all aspects of retailing and e-commerce, including store operation, merchandise, fulfillment, and has served as an executive at the Gap Inc. and with the Honest Company. I, Shlomo Chop, am the managing partner of Case Equity Partners. I've been involved as a principal or advisor in over $2 billion worth of real estate, and I've helped develop the Retail OS concept that intends to blend online and offline shopping by adding additional revenue streams to retail shopping centers. The topic is intended to explore the possibility that retail shopping centers are the true future in shopping and not far-flung e-commerce fulfillment centers. In this episode, we'll explore the synergies present by adding e-commerce to the shopping center. As this was our first episode, we initially dealt with some technical issues, but we now joined the team, issues resolved, starting with Jessica Mauser.
The big question here we're talking about today is, I jokingly like to refer to it as big box versus big docs. What is the future of fulfillment in the industry? So there obviously is a disconnect, as Matt was discussing here, between retail and fulfillment now and how those current footprints work. One of the things, Matt, you spoke about was technology and the lack of technology that really bridges the gap between these two. You've got some older technology that may be in your fulfillment centers that haven't caught up with potentially the retail format of the way we're now distributing direct to consumer, which is something that is very different from how we've traditionally looked at fulfillment centers in the past. So my question to you is, do you believe that we will start to see more fulfillment centers that are traditional in the sense that they may have been built in the 90s and further? Do you see those being transitioned to meet new technology needs to catch up to today's direct-to-consumer fulfillment?
Yeah, I think that is an active plan of attack for a lot of companies. You're seeing it with Walmart, kind of with what they're doing. From what I can tell, outside looking in, I'm not actively working with them now, but just reading the headlines, you see them actively trying to take advantage of the 4,000 plus stores that they have, and when they can, they take advantage of what's in the store, and then if they need to, they expand out. And yes, part of that process is kind of making sure everything is communicating with each other. And that, it starts with, I don't know if it starts, it's really just a big circular equation, but your computer, when you go to www.store.com, it's got to be communicating with your store if you really want to be having an accurate inventory count. It's also got to be communicating with your warehouse. A lot of layers to that. And again, when you've got older systems, it's going to take a little bit to get all those communicating together. But yeah, many companies are past that. One of the things that you're just seeing is kind of that cart before the horse. It sometimes takes significant capital to do that. And what do you need to do first? I mean, a lot of people are saying we need the footprint to have the inventory ready, and that's kind of fueling the growth of fulfillment centers right now. But uh, if companies are good stewards of their shareholders or their ownership, they're going to be focused on making those systems communicate, from the warehouse management to the point of sale. I don't think that fulfillment centers are truly dead. I think that they're also another aspect of the total equation to service the consumer.
Matt, can I ask
Because
you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things Shlomo had asked, very early on was, what happens to the fulfillment centers if companies are diverting to making their retail locations most efficient? And I think the answer is there is replenishment. You still want to be in good proximity to your store in order to, handle the volume. If you're doing the job well, you're going to be replenishing quite a bit. And so whether that's still being diverted from a fulfillment center, it's going to have to, be handled or be in close proximity to your stores.
So, Matt, I have a question just to dovetail on that. From your perspective, because your experience, you've got a lot of rich experience in big box retail, and the underlying sort of predicate and foundation of how they structured warehouse and supply chain probably sort of was more heavily influenced by the industrial area. So, economies of scale and so on and so forth, right? So, these big master hubs, the value of big box retail fulfilling for store is clearly evident and out there by numerous accounts, right? So, what do you think holds for the future? Is it that kind of, I think what you're saying is that is your sort of thought that fulfillment centers become more of a hub and spoke operation, and the hub primarily role is kind of a quasi cross dock, right? They're bringing in inbound POs, they're bringing in case packs and bulk inventory, and your local, maybe regional, however you want to call that, if it exists at a store or not, obviously their job is to fulfill eaches and service the inventory levels on the shop floor. Is that how you see it, or do you actually see like a full-blown decentralized model in the future?
I personally see it probably from the former aspect. I mean, I still think that, yeah, again, there's going to be more of that hub and spoke. And again, it goes to consumer preferences, with people having to stay home with COVID. I mean, I think as vaccine rollout, people get more comfortable, not as many cases, people are going to be willing to be more active in going into the stores. But I mean, there's still an element there that wants to stay at home and wants to get the product to them. Well, it's not as easy to do that from a store because they're not equipped, and that's not really the focus of what a store should be doing. So I think it still plays a role, in really companies betting on the future. And you're wanting to prevent, you don't want to be caught with your pants down in the next round of something like this happening. Another example I would say is the inventory when the Suez Canal, is that right? I'm gonna mix it up.
Yeah, when they're going
When that it
parallel
was
park the wrong way. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. I mean, so there you go. You've got weeks worth of inventory that you no longer have, and so you're not going to store that in a retail store. So yeah, this is another, um, having that distribution slash fulfillment type large warehouse footprint is going to be imperative. So you're still banking on all the disasters that can come, and I think that's where fulfillment and distribution centers play a part. There's still going to be people that want to have things delivered to them. That's where fulfillment centers play a part. But at the end of the day, you've got those that want to pick up from the retail center. You also, from a store perspective, those stores benefit from people walking in. Number one, you get the foot traffic that they're walking in to pick up a product, and yeah, times out of 10, they're going to pick something else up while they're there.
Yeah, so I think let's jump over to Rebecca now. Rebecca actually, and I'll let you introduce yourself because we had the technical issues. But Rebecca literally is at the forefront of bringing new tenants into retail, some of the online brands. So Rebecca, please tell us what you're seeing. Tell us your thoughts. Introduce yourself. You have an amazing, you've had an amazing career and you're still so young. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually just about to jump in anyway, Matt, and talk about, you know, size and scale because I spent the first part of my career in, I guess, what you could call big box, right? So Starbucks and Apple certainly uses its stores as fulfillment centers, as pickup centers, as mini distribution hubs, like et cetera, et cetera. And then moving into direct to consumer with like Warby Parker and Outdoor Voices and, even Joybird Furniture, which furniture is kind of a whole separate beast, then it becomes a little bit harder, right? Because your stores are smaller, your staff is smaller. So, like, even if you did have the infrastructure, which a lot of them don't, to use their stores as fulfillment centers, you have to split your manpower between front of house and back of house. And you don't want to sacrifice the customer experience, right? So, I guess my question for you is, and these are the brands that I'm working with right now, so to kind of back up, a lot of the brands that are opening stores now want to do things like fulfill from store, but now it's a matter of like, well, we don't want to split our inventory, or our rent is so expensive that we feel like it's not a good use of our money to use it 50% of it as a warehouse when we have a warehouse in the middle of nowhere that we can fulfill from, right? So I think if you can talk a little bit about that, and have you seen any of these smaller brands, because that's kind of what I'm dealing with every day, is like this push pull of like they know this is the direction that it's going, but it's just like they're not quite there yet.
Could I add? I just want to add before you answer, very, very short, sweet, to the point. Matt, when you answer, think fulfill from shelf versus fulfill from store versus fulfill from shopping center. Those are three distinctions, right? And also, let's think the distinction fulfillment center versus distribution center, right? So hub and spoke, cross docks, and things like that. Because you made some points, and I'm curious to hear within that context of those differentiations. And I know you'll dig into some of that.
There's a lot of things, a lot of ways that we can go. So, Rebecca, to your point, I think you did make a great differentiation between the types of product. I mean, it does lend itself for an Apple to be more efficient in something like that because ultimately they've kind of got that showroom type aspect, and they, the ability to get the product to the store kind of alleviates. Um, a lot of inventory that you've got to carry. So I think that's a good point, and I think there's nuances to everything. So I don't want to paint anything with too broad a brush. Um, I really don't know where to go with all that because there was a lot of stuff coming at me. Give me one direct question, and let me go with that one.
I guess like talk about size. Like how small have you seen this used successfully? And by small I mean like volume, sales volume, order volume. And is there like a tipping point where a brand is really just too small to benefit from fulfill from store because it splits them in too many directions, right?
Sure. Yeah, so I don't know that I've got like a number of what that would be because yeah, I guess each different company kind of has different breaking points. And so I will kind of back it up just a little bit. A lot of companies, especially these startup companies, they're benefiting and they're profitable in spite of themselves in a lot of way. A lot of ways they've got a unique product that consumers are have demand for and they want and they're willing to pay for it, and sometimes they're willing to wait for it. So the easy answer for a lot of these companies is to go with the 3PL. So yeah, then at that point a third party logistics provider, and then that way they're not really having to carry the real estate, they're not really having to worry about the operations. The problem with that is and you'll see it with most companies, though they may have started with the 3PL, as they get more sophisticated, they bring on a supply chain lead. The, the the call a lot of time is, hey, we want to have control of our destiny, and so we want to be the ones to dictate that. Because you're seeing this now, the 3PL community, and not in a negative sense. I mean, they're fat and happy. They're wanting to just take on as much as possible. Yet there's always losers in that. So when they're servicing 10 different customers out of one building, there's one of those customers is Fortune 500 that you always want to keep happy, and then there's just this guy that's doing a great job and um, wanting to succeed, but he's going to be the last priority in all of that. So yeah, I think a lot of the solutions right now are tied to 3PLs. But whenever a company can get to the place that they can take control of their destiny, I think, yeah, it's definitely beneficial to kind of own your supply chain network a little better. And I think a lot of these companies just aren't even taking the time. They know we're importing something from the Port of Long Beach, and we're shipping it out, and people are willing to pay for it and everything. But if they really do take the time to either bring on a supply chain head to evaluate what they're doing, or if they take the time to just run a network analysis, really to understand, what, am I shipping 90% of my product to the East Coast? Well, then that might lend itself to carrying having a Midwest footprint at that point, so that you can cut down some of that shipping cost, because you're carrying heavier inventory in the middle of the country versus shipping all the way across the country.
Yeah, so I'd
Yeah.
like, Rebecca, just before I get back to you, and I want to sort of bring it back to the question of shopping center versus warehousing, but anybody who's on Clubhouse, feel free to raise your hand to come up and ask a question. If you're on Zoom, then feel free to type a question. We won't be able to comment you in because people on Clubhouse will not be able to hear you. So type a question in. Rebecca?
Yeah, no problem. Actually, that's exactly where I was going we're seeing this really interesting thing happen where, and it was happening pre-pandemic, and I think it'll happen again post, where direct-to-consumer brands will start to kind of cluster together because they want the co-tenancy, right? And so we'll see this happen in some of these shopping centers. And so I think the most interesting thing about fulfill from store model is if it's kind of like a multi-brand fulfill from store model. And so I'd be curious to see or to hear, Matt, from you, are you seeing that happening anywhere? And, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's something that Shlomo and I have been talking about for many years. I think that is almost the best solution um, for smaller tenants to take advantage of the economies of scale, to use um, a shared system where they can eliminate some of the overhead that goes into, whether it be warehouse management systems, whether it be the labor, whether it be the supply chain expertise. It makes a lot of sense. Again, it kind of going back to the 3PLs, they have a traditional model that a lot of companies are just having to be shoehorned into at their expense ultimately. So I think the market is ripe for someone like that to step in and really be a consolidated player. And it cuts both ways. It cuts from the supply chain aspect and the real estate aspect. A lot of times, um, people just have a hard time envisioning something like that taking place. And hey, there's a hesitancy as well, because when you are starting to have to share your intellectual capital with a third party, and then you've got multiple companies doing the same thing, there's a hesitancy. So if you've got a bridge builder that can do that and bring people together, I think that is a good solution for young startup companies to be successful in the future.
I just want to add to that. So the idea of co-opting inventory on site, it does make a lot of sense. We tested at Gap Inc. ship from store 12 years ago. And of course, the idea was, well, we have product in closer proximity to customers. Why would we not just reroute orders and have them send them and save on shipping costs? And two things happened. One was there's only so much demand to be held at that store to rationalize the inventory level, number one. Number two was there was only so much capacity, right? So the depth of inventory per SKU was always going to be a constraint, number one. But actually, the real problem, the first one was the differential gap between systemic versus physical inventory. System says, hey, you have three, customer wants two, associate can only find one. And that was an ongoing problem, right? Because then you have to like backtrack the customer purchase flow and go, hey, sorry, it's going to be a little bit delayed or whatever, or we're not going to get it to you as fast as possible. And the second one was labor costs and efficiency, right? You're working in a really small space. So the ceiling of maximizing the efficiency and throughput, and also the labor cost was, it was challenging. And the net of it is that that test did not offset the savings in shipping to make it happen. So today, do I believe it could? Yeah, I mean, look, we've done ship from store for many years. I did it. I'm not even going to tell you how many years ago, but way back in the Stone Age, there was this process in college that we called, when I was an intern at Gap, called charge sense. Customer picks up the phone, they call and say, hey, I want the shaker blue sweater roll neck thing in size medium. Can you send it to me? And of course, funny enough, we would write down their credit card number on this like silly photocopied sheet, and we would actually just charge them and we'd send it to them. It was enormously inefficient. It was not a
Wait, is this
tactical
like a
strategy.
QVC minus the TV? You were just
Oh
sitting
my
back there.
gosh.
I know. And like, I know you guys are watching me on Zoom right now going, man, he's so old. He must have gray hair, but he doesn't. So, like, what gives? Um, it was a long time ago, but not really that long ago, at least in my head, is the way I
We
sort of
still,
explain it.
I'm pretty sure we were writing down credit card numbers till about 3 years ago. I think people still do.
Okay.
Let's
Well,
be, yeah.
thank
Well,
you, Jessica. I
I'll give
feel a
you a
lot better.
pass on that one, but it's the calling for the QVC orders that has me questioning how.
So I just wanted to check something over here. So the I think something that Target has done. Target has recently shifted, like Matt alluded to having these hubs near stores so that the product the product comes from the hubs or gets sent back and forth. I'm not specifically familiar with exactly how it's done, but basically saying that we can't use the store as the location, if you will, from where we're fulfilling, right? And some inefficiencies have been brought up about ship from shelf, right? And something that Rebecca was reacting to before, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it as well. So ship from shelf is inefficient, right? You need someone like Instacart going up and down the aisle, taking from the shelf, putting it into a box, right? Um, I think, however, the question is, and there are multiple issues that come up with this, is pre-positioning your product near the store, near enough that it's a very quick shot to replenish a store and a very quick shot to get goods that may not be on the shelf to be sold from store, but yet your e-commerce is pre-positioned as well for the store as well. That's some of the stuff that I guess Ryan and I have been working on. But the thought process is, well, if you can use the robotics and maybe some of the cubed robotics where you fit a lot more into a very small space, then maybe you can make sense out of it. And I believe directly you asking about economics as well, about size and how that works. I could tell you that in our numbers that we've done, um, we can charge around $1 or less a pick, which is a big thing for e-commerce, using robotics from within a shopping center area. The biggest issue is stranded inventory, right? You need to make sure that if you're going from a main warehouse to a local area, that you don't have it stranded in the local area, you can't fulfill it, right? I guess it helps to be able to sell it on sale within the store and knock it out if you want to, but still, it makes sense. You sort of, at a certain point, depending on how wrong you end up being, you end up, taking a bet that may not pay out, and you'll have a certain amount of product that's stranded. So, I mean, that's sort of on your question of size. That's sort of some of the thoughts that I actually had some research I've done.
So let me jump in here for all of us real estate junkies who want to know how this translates actually into the world of industrial versus retail, and what does it mean for retail? Is retail getting smaller and industrial is getting bigger? Because that seems to be the trend. This is kind of my pivot question here. So we're seeing the big industrial companies of the world, call it the Prologises and those, and they have over the past not only taken over, but purchased dead mall space. It seems to be this ongoing conversation. This is going to be the trend that goes on forever, and retail is dead because Prologis is going to continue buying all your retail, and your retail are going to turn into distribution centers. Do we have this all wrong? Is Prologis picking up all of these dead retail centers to actually make them into retail fulfillment where people can come in and grab merchandise? Are they going to end up taking our retail tenants and providing the format that retail landowners cannot figure out right now?
So I don't think Prologis is not adapting into malls. They may be knocking down malls and building
See, but that's
fulfillment,
what we're
right?
assuming. We're assuming, but have we actually seen them knock down a mall yet? I can tell you there's two in my market that they've purchased, but nothing's been knocked down, and they've had these acquisitions for close to a year now. So when you
Yeah,
start looking at how are they going to adaptive reuse, and is the idea for adaptive reuse changing on the side of these dead malls because of the last 18 months and going through COVID, what may have been a true distribution repurpose 2 years ago, are we now seeing that potentially shift into a pick and pull or mini distribution to offset the guys that people do still want to go in store and pick some items up, and these shopping old malls will lend to larger stores in the area?
I'm going to let
Just
Matt tackle it, but if you're looking at traditional warehousing, actually, Rebecca, I'm sorry. So warehousing, there's no way they're going to keep the existing structure for traditional warehousing because it's just not efficient because it's all about price per pick. But if it's a new model that's out there, like what we're talking about, then perhaps they would. Rebecca, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so Jessica, I just want to understand what you're suggesting because it's really interesting. Are you suggesting that they could be creating some sort of shoppable warehouse like IKEA, but for multiple products where like it's a
Yep.
BOPIS only location? I actually have
Yes.
been waiting for this to happen. Like
Yeah, that's
this
exactly,
is
because I think
gonna
2 years
happen.
ago this would have never been a conversation, but now with the what COVID has done to our markets, why would we tear down a mall which can actually adequately do what we're talking about here? When you put the advent of technology in and robotics, you've got the space, you've got the delivery, you've got, and these are all mainly in your last mile distribution. You can't get a warehouse out in the middle of BFE anymore because you can't do a 1 day delivery from BFE, right? So if you have these selective dead malls, are you really going to tear them down now, or are you replanning to repurpose these in a way that's meaningful to today's consumer and shopping patterns versus the distribution of 2 years ago?
Right. So I think
So I have a real
I've
estate.
thought this
Oh, sorry,
for,
Rebecca.
oh,
I didn't hear you. Go.
sorry,
So
go ahead.
go.
I was just gonna say, and then go ahead, but I have thought there's gonna be this like rift for quite some time where we'll have very distinct retail as utility, and its purpose is not to entertain. It is just utility, like let me just pick up my thing and go. And then you'll have retail as entertainment, which is more of the, what we're seeing like Glossier do with its new stores that are opening, and so on, and so a lot of the direct to consumer brands. So I think while they were trying to have them both be in the same location, I think they'll actually separate. So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Shlomo.
Yeah, so I think the challenge is you use Prologis as an example, and I'm not talking about any knowledge that I may or may not have about Prologis. I'm talking about generally. I think if Prologis being a REIT and they're valued based on their funds from operation, the income that comes in, they're not necessarily an operator, so they'd have to find an operator that would do something like that, as opposed to, let's say, an Amazon. Amazon would do something like that because they're not real estate, they're based on total revenue. So I don't see someone like Prologis doing it. I do think it makes sense to have a shoppable warehouse. I mean, quite frankly, it's a consign it's a big warehouse store with a consignment model is really what it comes down to, right? Where you don't take inventory risk. It's in a way it's similar to what Ryan and I've been working on to a certain extent, not to sort of continue going back to it, but sort of where the warehouse is on site, the shopping happens in store, but the product belongs to the ultimate customer. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting where instead of turning the retail into the warehouse, you're turning the warehouse into the retail, so to speak, is what sort of you're suggesting, Jessica.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
so
especially in a format, because you're looking at these big, they're huge pieces of land. They have a ton of parking. And again, they're logistically well centered most of the time, these malls. But you've got basically, I mean, it's a big box. So does this end up being what fulfills our future needs for this growth between retail and industrial? And it's been staring us in the face for years, and we've all been mocking it, and it's going to come back to haunt us. That's my question.
No, so Jessica, I do like that. I think that's very interesting point. I would say what we've seen to date has been when the malls are bought out, a lot of times they're demolished and a new fulfillment center is put up. I kind of to Shlomo's point as well. Prologis is a savvy group, but at the same time, they're going to go and probably attack the low hanging fruit. So if that is tearing down the mall and putting up a new fulfillment center, that's what they're going to do. But I also, to that point of them being savvy, they are also very forward thinking. And if they see a glimmer of hope and profitability around doing that type of conversion, you better believe they're probably on it.
Yeah, and I think from a real estate perspective, Jessica, here's the interesting thing. Hotels are financed based on a nightly rate, right? So you'll take a loan based on what your historical nightly rate is, where it is now, a moment in time, and the comparisons, right? The comparisons in the market, right? Office buildings, industrial buildings, retail right now is financed based on the leases you have going forward, right? When commercial real estate finance adjusts how we look at the revenue coming from a warehouse to be more as a day by day, if you will, of a hotel or even of a medical facility where Medicaid prices change, when something that, then we're going to start seeing a lot of the bigger players take greater risk because they'll be able to finance the hell out of properties and innovate on the fly. But until such time that happens, the lenders will not just, give you money and let you run an operating business out of your commercial real estate property, again, unless it's a hotel, so to speak. So I think that, in my opinion, is a major hurdle that needs to be overcome. And I see Anne's in the audience. She and I had a conversation about this the other day.
Yeah, and I just use Prologis because they're the ones who've picked up the most amount of shopping centers off the top of, off the top of my head. Who's the guy who's out there making the power moves on the retail? And that's where I wonder if we're actually going to see things revert back. And Rebecca, I feel like this is something that really would speak to the level of tenants you work with, right? Is Walmart going to go out there and take half of an old mall to continue doing fulfillment? Probably not, because they probably have a 110,000 square foot store within 2 miles of this particular mall, just generally speaking of how retail works. But let's say you are smaller, you're a 5 to 10,000 square foot. You're not Apple, where your product is small and easy to fulfill, and the consumer wants to buy it at the store anyways because they want to troubleshoot it with you, and I want you to show me that that is charged because I'm going to turn it on for 50 minutes trying to figure out why my brand new Apple AirPods aren't working before I realize they aren't charged. So, other besides that though, most other products we want to be able to pick and go fairly quickly. So do you see the ability for what may have been slated for industrial staying in the retail lane to fulfill, kind of, if we can get the technology right? I mean, that's what it sounds like the big holdup here is between the physical real estate that exists and the ability for companies to utilize what's there. There's a stopgap between the technology that would allow both employees to be efficient on the floor and in the back, and then also the efficiency of having your inventory split if you were to have two separate locations versus one location. Am I kind of reading this right from your perspective of things?
So I think to kind of sum up your question, just for my brain, is would direct-to-consumer brands benefit more from this kind of fractional shoppable warehouse model? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think, okay, so here is what, depending on their stage, here's what a lot of these D2C brands are dealing with. It's that, you have these rising costs of digital advertising, right? And they start to kind of look around for other marketing channels, and suddenly physical retail becomes very appealing. I think probably for those that are very early and have a lot of runway from a brand affinity and brand recognition standpoint, they would probably benefit more from an actual like retail as leisure, retail as experience, because that will build the brand affinity. If you're a little bit further along, like, think of some of the D2C 1.0s, like Everlane, like potentially even Glossier. It's so recognizable now, like from an early adopter standpoint, right? Like I'm not talking about they're not like super super broadly recognizable, but anyone who's aware of D2C brands is aware of Everlane and Glossier and those types. I think that they are they are well known enough that if you plopped like a BOPIS only location somewhere, people would flock to it because they have enough of a customer reach to kind of command that. So I think it really does depend on stage.
So and that's something. I mean, you touched on something interesting, Rebecca, because D2C is all about establishing a tribe, being close to your consumer and all that. The second the crap hit the fan, they were all in Target and Walmart. Boom, who cares? We don't need the connection, right? We're going wholesale, right? And then they're like, it didn't really sell on the shelf because no one knew who we were. And they put us side by side with like, the real toxic deodorant, right, Matt? The toxic deodorant side by side with my cool deodorant that's got 17 different oils that are squeezed from, I don't know, a freaking caterpillar or something. No caterpillars harmed in making this
It
video.
would be
But the point
eucalyptus,
is,
and
you got,
yeah, it's eucalyptus.
yeah, a chemist
Or
I'm not clearly. Yeah,
lavender,
I'm
something along
Charcoal,
there.
It's a good stuff.
magnesium.
Charcoal.
charcoal. I'm clearly not a chemist. The bottom line is, right? So, but I guess the question, Jessica, I'm sorry, Rebecca, is do you, are the DTC brands sort of, in your opinion, if trying to get off the ground, given all the headwinds from CAC, customer acquisition costs, to the fulfillment, all these different things, ready to say, you know what, if it's the right curation, we'll look a little grungy if we have to. We just got to make some money, or do you think we're just not there yet?
Right. Yeah. So I think it depends on the brand. I think it's a lot of the brands are when they start off are very protective, rightly so, over owning their own image, destiny, environment. And as like the customer kind of becomes aware of them and as they gain trust and even as they gain confidence in themselves as a brand, right? And in their own abilities, then it's like, okay, let's actually make some moves to have broader distribution instead of being so precious about kind of our environment and our image. Not to say that they're going to go and do something totally off brand, but I think there is this like natural evolution, at least in my experience and what I'm seeing. So I think that answers your question.
Got it. We have an audience question, and I do want to bring it up if you guys don't mind. It's from Carlton Amu, who basically he's asking 3PLs with a focus on micro fulfillment centers and last mile delivery. So we're seeing a lot of that in grocery. He specifically addressed it to Matt and Rebecca. So we're seeing a lot of that in grocery. And he's curious how some of this translates to the bigger picture, good or bad, and otherwise.
I don't know if I'm directly answering the question. So when I think about grocery and fulfillment, I think there are ready solutions with 3PLs, and that's really, I mean, you've got the Americold Lineage Logistics. They are the easy solution. Now, when you talk about larger grocers, a lot of them do that in house, but say for the smaller, I mean, you're many times leaning on those. I think it's comparable discussion as what we had later. Even those large users still have large large customers like McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, whoever the case may be, and so the smaller you are, the further down that you get. I think retail is probably, I mean, real estate's one of the biggest barriers to the current problems in the cold storage supply chain, just for the fact of you've got those companies that are gobbling up everything that's available, and then you have hesitant real estate developers that don't want to put in the cost that it takes to put up a cold storage facility. So And Jessica, I think you're about to chime in with some good stuff, but I didn't know if you knew you were off
Yeah,
mute, but
yeah, no.
feel free
I
to
was
jump
kind of
in.
nodding my head. I was like, I don't want to talk over him. No,
Yeah,
I
feel
can.
free.
I mean, it's a huge cost to landlords to jump into cold storage, right? And then once you are cold storage, if you were to run out of a market, what do you do with a 50,000 or 70,000 square foot cold storage box? It's really expensive to take apart. So this is where I almost circle back to the question on dead malls. How much infrastructure in these dead malls? You've got plumbing, you've got power, you've got so much infrastructure in those buildings that doesn't exist in your existing industrial supply. So, is this where we start to see the hop, especially on last mile distribution? There's such a push, and not to get us out of this, but Matt, one of my questions back to you is going to be because of the way our shipping is being done now, and what is it, 90% of goods come on ships, right? And you've got backups of 22 ships deep down in Long Beach right now. I think Oakland's still running an 11 ship log. So you've got this backlog at almost every port imaginable at this juncture. Because of this, are we going to see retailers take on bigger supplies at once so that they're not getting into the situation where they can't get the plastic to build the jumpy house and our jacket is 3 months late because it's stuck on the Suez because somebody decided to have a cocktail the night before they drove their ship? I mean, are we going to see, and how much more pressure is that going to put on last mile distribution? Because I don't think you want that backlog of inventory to be in your last mile distribution. You want that out in BFE in Nebraska, I'm guessing,
Sure.
not in San Francisco at $2 a square foot, triple
Yeah,
net.
but if you think about it, here's the deal, okay? How many shopping centers? Yeah, okay. Here's the bigger picture, and I know you're asking a pointed question. I sort of want to zone it out a bit to the bigger picture as well. There's so many shopping centers with vacancies, okay? And the question then becomes, if there's a challenge getting product to the retail store, there's got to be a way for real estate developers, owners, etc., to be able to benefit from this issue and fill space in the shopping centers in some capacity, whether it's cold storage or any of the type of things that you're bringing up over here. And I think it's just like, we're talking about, like when we started out, Matthew spoke about the infrastructure being an issue, but really it's a good idea. Well, here's the deal. Infrastructure is a capital item. Capital items are always worth doing for operational efficiencies for the most part. Obviously, it's got to equate, but it's worth doing. It's worth investing. So when we look at retail and we say, oh, retail is suffering and all this stuff, I mean, where's the creativity, right? That's really what it comes down to, right? And I think, Jessica, you're spot on when you're asking that question.
I just want to add a comment to it, Jessica. So, having a lot of experience in this area, one thing that I would tell you is the amount of inventory you're carrying on your books is incredibly important, right? So, Wall Street just wants to know where you are on inventory, cost per square foot, right? By bulking up on inventory, it's going to put a wrinkle into your balance sheet, and it's ultimately going to impair your cash conversion cycles, right? So, you're just holding a lot of stuff because you want to sell it over time. The tactic that a lot of consumer and retail brands are deploying right now is they are ratcheting down the abundance and magnitude of discounting and promotion, right? So essentially, microeconomics, very simple, less discounts, you have less unit demand, but you have higher AURs, and you can get more revenue out of what you have in the short term. However, I think
AUR?
if we
What's
sat,
AUR?
thank you. Average unit retail,
I was
essentially
waiting for
getting
something.
yeah, ding, ding, ding. I got
Yeah,
like a
there we
little
go.
I got a
Ah,
Simon Cowell
I
like
was
X
like,
on me, like, eh.
is that like a cam charge? What are we getting to here? I'll
What
figure
are you
this out a
talking
little.
about?
I'll figure
Jargon.
this one out
Um,
later.
Yeah, sorry, go,
but
sorry.
you can get more for your product, right? You're not going to sell as much as you would. But I think if we collectively sat in the boardrooms of a lot of these retail and consumer companies, and someone said, we don't really have an indication that a lot of this supply chain latency and backlog. And by the way, from my backyard, I can see all those ships sitting out there in the ports of Long Beach. It's real.
You
And
sound like
if you told them
you
this
sound like a certain former vice presidential candidate. Okay. You can see it
is,
from your backyard.
and my eyesight, if it was better, I could see Russia. I mean, it's really, really incredible. But yeah, I don't think they would know either. They're like, hey, this is going to last for 5 years. I think they'd be scratching their head going,
Wow.
ugh, what do we do now? And they'd probably go into resourcing mode and try and figure out some sort of angle.
Well, Ryan, it's a testament of just the age or the time that we're in right now. Because 5 years ago, what was the MO for a lot of companies? Just in time. And so that just in time model kind of got attacked a little bit with the COVID in the Suez Canal. So uh, it's sad. It's kind of, we sometimes as companies we go ditch to ditch with kind of our approach. One last thought, and it was kind of like it's tied to Ryan's comments and Rebecca's as well. One of the hiccups I think that really we have is we're too siloed as retailers and as supply chain retail operators and supply chain operators. I see it all the time within companies. They're just not talking, not communicating enough, and um, the sooner we get people talking hand in hand, I think the more efficient we're going to be.
So we're coming up on the top of the hour. So Matt, I'd like, if you don't mind, each of us would like to go through, like, Matt, if someone wanted to reach you to talk about their company's fulfillment issues, fulfillment, or, real estate fulfillment sort of optimization that you do for
Yeah.
JLL, and please expand on that because I'm sure I've butchered that like a cow. The point is, if you could just tell us how to reach you, so that anyone watching either live or following knows how to reach out to one of the smartest guys in the industry.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I pretend to be one on TV. No, so you
We
can
all
reach
are
me at
today.
right. Um, mr.powers at am.jll.com. And I'll send my contact information through the chat as well. But yes, Shlomo, I mean, in a high level sense, it's just really helping to maximize your supply chain footprint. But so much of that again is hand in hand conversations with the retail side of things. So I try not to approach it just in that true supply chain silo. Where customers are open to it, let's start talking the retail side of things too. So yeah, it's solving for how companies can be more competitive to gain market share. But it's also the opposite side where you and I work together on finding the solutions of the future as well. So yeah, hope to have the opportunity to join you guys in the future again, and some of you on the that are listening, please feel free to reach out to me. I love to talk.
Yeah, and Rebecca, so you obviously have a extensive background on the DTC side, and you're right now in a store startup, right? And you mentioned you're a retail maximalist, I think is used language similar to that, right? But can you expand a little on the philosophy? Talk about what it is exactly that you do. And
Sure.
because I believe there's a blend, because there are not many people in the industry that are on what you see all the sides from the way you see it with the background. So talk a little bit about your philosophy, and please, how do we reach out to you to sort of learn more if I'm a direct-to-consumer brand looking to explore retail?
Yeah, so thanks, Shlomo. I would say from a philosophy standpoint, it's very simply many brands can benefit from owned stores. Not all. I'm sure there are cases where you can stay direct to consumer and forever and ever and make millions and millions of dollars, and that's wonderful. But I think, the future of retail is not e-commerce and it's not physical retail. It is blended. And that includes things like wholesale and partnerships and consignment and, digital channels as well. So, it is completely blended. And so that's kind of where I sit, is in the physical retail brick and mortar area. So I help direct to consumer brands open physical stores, everything from strategy to infrastructure, hiring, staffing, training. And you're right, I'm on site right now with a brand in the middle of a lot of boxes on the other side of this beautifully wallpapered wall. So to reach me, you can simply email me at rebecca@condratretail.com. You can DM me on Twitter, rdcondrat, or you can go to condratretail.com and set up a Calendly appointment if you want to chat.
Got it. And Rebecca is Rebekah. She was
It
the cool
is.
girl in school with that name. That's what we know.
The girl with the
So
name always misspelled, but yes.
yeah, so before I move on, I just want to let everyone know. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be posting this. Hopefully, the end result isn't that bad. We're going to be doing a lot of editing and things like that, and we'll have each of you in for follow-up visits to our studio. No, we're not. I'm kidding. So
I want to know when we're getting a studio. Wait a minute.
Yeah, of course, in every city.
And everybody, I want to know, should I be honored that I was the guinea pig to help you guys in the number one, or was it truly that I was the guinea pig? And so it's like, oh well,
it was all out of
throw it
love.
away with Matt.
We started with the best, so we're gonna have a very hard time going from here. So I'm gonna let Shlomo figure out what to do next.
No, Matt. I don't think you're a guinea pig at all. You're just someone that I know knows his stuff, and there's no way I was gonna take a risk on someone that I didn't know knew his stuff on our first thing out, because then no one shows up to our second one, and no one listens to it online. But moving that aside, because I just want to address something here. This conversation, there's so much more to talk about this. I mean, we could go on literally for 6 hours over here. We'll be talking to ourselves. That's it. I mean, it is what it is. So if you visit our website, it's RE-Talesio, Tales as in story, RE-Tales.io. Now, we're going to be posting this up, but also you could apply to be part of our Slack channel. It's open to anyone in commercial real estate, supply chain, retail, and any connected industries. And we'll bring you in on our Slack channel for follow-up discussions. And the goal over here, and the goal of this entire thing, is to have cross discussion, like Matt just mentioned, right? The retail doesn't talk to the supply chain, etc., right? So just here on the stage, we got Ryan, who's like master retailer, background in all parts of retailing. You got Matt, who's logistics, warehousing, real estate, formerly Walmart. You got Rebecca, who's a superstar on the real estate brokerage side. I'm sorry, that's not Rebecca. That's Jessica. Sorry, I switched you guys. Body doubles now.
I'm
That's
not
what
a
we're gonna do
broker.
now. Great. Yeah, I know, but it's okay. You could be a broker for the last 5 minutes. No, we got Jessica as a superstar broker and president of obviously a company, a leader, and then Rebecca obviously with her experience on the DTC side. And then you have myself. I'm glad you guys let me join, so to speak. So the point is, there's this cross discussion of bringing together multiple industries, because we need to ask those important questions. So RETALES.io. It's also that you'll see on Clubhouse. It says retails.io. Just put it into your browser, and we'd love to have you guys be part of a Slack channel. So with that, I think, Jessica, I'd like to turn to you to sort of talk about it, as what it is that you do on a daily basis, and what what are you looking to do to sort of deal with some of the issues we've discussed. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, what would they get in touch with you specifically about if they're not in the San Francisco area? Okay, because I know you're based in San Francisco, but I also know you're on the board of Lee and Associates, which is a great brokerage house. And give us your contact info if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That first question is very loaded. What do I do on a day-to-day basis? I don't even know. Run around like a chicken with my head cut off? I don't know. So I'm Jessica Bowser, as Shlomo so nicely pointed to. I run an office here in the San Francisco Bay Area, just in Pleasanton, California, which is the suburbs. We have a lot of distribution going on out here, a lot of last mile distribution at that. I am a retail broker by trade. But I do flex into industrial as well, and I'm working more and more on where this retail meets industrial, and I think it is actually the way of the future for both retail and industrial. So I'm really excited to be on the forefront of that, and what kind of makes me even more excited is to see that the market is shifting in the direction that is so positive for retail, because we've been talking about this Amazon cliff of taking out retail for years and years, and well, now we are at the proverbial cliff, and now we have to change the way we develop and we look at retail. So I'm excited to work with owners, investors, and a lot of who are in my portfolio not on transitioning retail, making retail better, and figuring out where we can make more money on assets. So I kind of like to take everything with a new approach and figure out what's going to work, not what did work. Let's get out of the past and move forward. So that's what I'm doing on a day-to-day. That's kind of my passion of things. I also sit on the board of directors for Lee and Associates nationally, which is always fun. And I can be found in multiple modes here. You can find me on Instagram at 925CRE Jessica. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also shoot me an email at jmauser@leeassociates.com. Always available in the office as well. So I've posted my information up on the chat for those who need to find me. And of course, you can find me on Clubhouse. So Whether I pick up my phone is a whole separate issue, but email, text message, Instagram, those are great. Those are great. But yeah, there's only so many ways that I can actually successfully answer people's phone calls. And normally it's when I'm not doing any of the other 7 things I just mentioned. So
Got it. So, Ryan, you're going to take us home. And I'd like, just one thing that you didn't touch on is that you advise multiple startups because of your background. And I know you didn't, I know I'm going to try to promote you here for a second. The guy's got a background in store operations, merchandising, supply chain, technology. I mean, built stuff from the ground up. And what did I miss? Executive level, literally running departments around Banana Republic Europe, DTC, okay. Jessica Alba, the Honest Company. I mean, should I go on and on? Are you blushing yet? So the point is, if someone wanted to reach out to you, aside from the fact with our work with Retail OS and Shop Fulfill, that we're trying to take a lot of these concepts and put it within a shopping center and do something that we're working on together. But if someone had a DTC and was maybe ahead of the point of a store where Rebecca would come into play and just needed some help, some guidance, and some, advisory, like, or anything else, how would they reach out to you? And what is it that you look for when you work with some of these brands? And where do you see the future of retail and DTC? I know it's a lot. We'll give you 2 seconds to sort of collect your thoughts and go for it. Sure.
That's a lot. Like I
I
don't
just
think
said
my
that.
brain can hold it. I was like, whoa.
I
So
believe in
first of all,
you.
before I forget, you can reach me. You can just find me on my Twitter handle through Clubhouse if you like, and DM me there. Don't get too excited. I'm not an active Twitter publisher, but I do consume a lot of really great threads and smart people. So that you can reach me there, or you can find me at rwolf@shopfulfill.com. In terms of just like what I look for businesses, obviously product market fit or a vision for product market fit is paramount for any business and anything you're doing. But for businesses that are trying to solve a growth problem, that paradigm is real today. I mean, in DTC land, I run my own DTC, and I can tell you firsthand, I'm not alone. There's a lot of turbulence, right? Like this iOS 14.5 update definitely throws, in the words of the Queen's English, a spanner in the works, so to speak. And it's definitely opening up a lot of eyeballs into how do we grow and what's the right tactic. I think for the companies that have a real singular focus on how they can create value for customers, and I know this sounds very trite, but like that ultimately is going to be the answer for a lot of them versus the ones that just want to throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see if something sticks and just hope to God they can do enough of it to make a difference. But I think bigger picture, I see more of a harmonious future and one less predicated by this kind of either or mentality. So for example, in all fairness, when I joined the Honest Company as one of the first part of the first executive team with the founders, and I was working on the launch of Honest Beauty with Jessica, which was the subsidiary beauty version of Honest Company, and launching the first retail concept for that. It was interesting because the organization was all digital native tech, hip, super cool, very smart people, by the way. And so many of them would just look at me and go, "What are we doing with retail?" Right? And I would just smirk. And today, surely that kind of has squarely turned up on its head because the either or idea of the conversation is dead, right? It's both end. I think Warby Parker, I'm only about half to 2/3 of the way through their S1. But if I just had to pick out one consumer VC backed unicorn that has done a heck of a lot more right than wrong, go look at what they're doing. Do I believe them that they have a runway? I think they claim they have a runway. They're at 145 stores now, that they think they can run up to 950, 1,000, possibly. But it doesn't matter, right? Like they've really architected a great business that is the culmination of incredibly great branding execution, product execution, value proposition execution, multi-channel execution. And so I think they're an example of what the future holds, and ultimately the best survive, the best experience, the best product, and the best value proposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate it. So That basically, assuming no of our other hosts have anything that they'd like to add, that puts our first tech issue riddled, but hopefully sorted out. Zoom/Clubhouse event that wraps it. We're going to be posting it online, and it'll be digitally remastered. And we'll hopefully have you guys take a look at it. And we're going to be having one coming up soon. There's a couple of topics on the table. Once the brain trust comes to consensus, you will certainly hear from us. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to follow the club, RE-Talesio. Just hit the little greenhouse on top. You'll follow it, follow the people on the stage, and go to RE-Talesio and feel free to apply to be on our chat, because the more we talk, the better, the more we can effectuate change. Thank you so much. Have yourself a great day.